Hey everybody, it's finally here. How to make 2D Minecraft episode 9. What we're going to start off with is backpacking some new assets that we need to make the title screen. So what we're going to backpack is we're going to backpack the screens, the buttons, and the player. We need this because there's new costumes. Alright, so we have our project right here. It's not shared, so let's click see inside. So save as a copy, because this is episode 9. And now we have our project. Let's grab the stuff from our backpack. Let's grab the player, buttons, and screens. Now right here, we can delete this comment. I'm just deleting it because why not? So now we have our player 2 sprite, which it has no code because it's just the costumes. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag both of these costumes into our player sprite. And the original one was called body, but we need this one because the head is different to match Alex's head. So now we can delete body. And now what we're going to do next is click into the screen sprite, and we only need the menu costume into the backdrop. And speaking of the backdrop, let's click there now. So we're going to delete the sunset, night, and sunrise because we're actually going to use like visual effects like brightness effect and color effect. That's what we're going to use. So, and the last thing we're going to do is hide the screen sprite because, let me just mute this, because if we actually start it, it's in the way of our playtesting. Like the game's actually going on, but we don't know it. So we have to hide the screen sprite. There we go. Now we can see what's going on. So the first thing we should do is work on the day and night cycle, which we should do that in the sun and moon. Oh, and also we could delete this player too. So, sun and moon. What we're going to do is we're going to add a show block because when we add the title screen, we're going to hide it first. So we're actually going to do that now. Let's do that. So when green flag clicked, hide. And then we're obviously going to broadcast this from the button sprite. And while we do that, let's just make the broadcast now. So let's call it create new world. Okay. So now our code should look like this. New green flag and then create new world. So now what we're going to do next is add a new variable to keep track of how fast the sun and moon moves, or actually just the weight between it. Let's call it time change. Okay, for this sprite only. Make sure it says for this sprite only. So now we're going to set time change after the show to 5. So then we wait time change seconds before turning 1 degree. And we can't test that now because we broadcasted create new world. So what I'm actually going to do first is go here and then broadcast create new world in the stage. And there we go. While we're in here, let's actually add some new stuff to help. So what we're going to do is we don't even need this. We don't even need the weight of anything. So delete all that. Clear graphic effects. And we're going to make a new variable. We're going to call it time speed change. And it's just like how much it'll get dark. And 0.5 is if you want to make it go completely black when the moon is fully up. So now what we're going to do is now we're going to finally add our forever loop. And instead of just doing one constant thing, we're going to repeat 180 times. Now we're actually going to use the effects. So change, and let's start with the brightness effect. 0 minus time speed change. Now what this does, change the brightness effect by negative 0.5 because that's what time speed change is set to, but we need to also wait for the time change in the sun and moon. But since we made that for this sprite only, we need to make use of the thing of thing block. So where it says stage, we have to click sun and moon, change X position to be time change. So wait time change of sun and moon seconds. And just making it darker and brighter isn't the only thing that we're going to do. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to change the color effect. What are we going to change it by? Positive time speed change, because that brings it closer to red, so then we get that like evening feeling, like where the sky is orange. So now duplicate this whole repeat and just put it right underneath. So now the only thing that we're going to change is we're going to change the brightness effect by positive time speed change and change the color effect by negative time speed change. So now we're going to improve the player movements, because let's test this right now. So if you walk to the left, you instantly face right again. And that's not good. But before we fix that, we have to actually keep track of the actual controls, because normally it's just the arrow keys, but some people prefer the WASD keys, or even mobile controls, which we might get to in a way later episode. So instead, we're just going to put the whole thing in a separate sprite and then broadcast a new message called set controller. Now, why are we doing this before the player movement? Well, we need to check for controls first, so then the player knows what controls you pushed after the controls are actually pushed. So we need to set our controller, and then the player reads it. So now what we're going to do is put all the controls in a new sprite named controls. Now this is one of those ghost sprites. I don't even know if that's the real name. It just changes variables and stuff, which is what we're going to do. So when I receive set controller, we're going to make 2 custom blocks for this to make code easier. So the first will be controls X. Run without screen refresh. And we're going to put that in. And then controls Y. Also run without screen refresh. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put both of those custom blocks, X and Y, underneath the when I receive set controller. Let's work with the controls X first. So to do this, we need to make a new variable, call it move X, for this sprite only. I'm going to hide that. Then set move X to 0. Now we're going to add an if, or since we're using 2, checking if the right arrow key is pressed or the D key is pressed. This is the right arrow, for WASD. So we're going to set move X to 1. Now let's duplicate that underneath, and then left arrow and A, and set move X to -1. Now let's work on the controls Y. So what we're going to do is duplicate all of controls X. we're going to set move X. Well, we're not, because we don't want to override our controls X. So what we're going to do is make a new variable called move Y. This will use vertical. So what we're going to do is set move Y to 0. Now we need to change these keys to work for up and down instead of left and right. Let's do that now. If key up arrow pressed or key W, then set move Y to 1. And if the down arrow key or the S key is pressed, then set move Y to -1. And the last thing we need to do is make sure that move X and move Y are reset when the flag is clicked. So let's just set move X and move Y to 0 underneath a when green flag clicked. Now, we actually have to get the player to move by these controls. So what we're going to do is, in the move horizontal, let's work on that first. So, let's make some space. So we're going to make a new variable called key X for all sprites. Now set key X to, and not this, because this is the old controls. What we need now is the controls from the actual control sprite. So we're going to grab the thing of thing block again, and we're going to make it of controls, and not the X position, but the move X, and set speed X to 5 times key X. But actually, we're not going to do that. Change speed X by 5 multiplied by key X. So now we can remove this because we're going to add better code for that. So if the absolute value or abs of, and then we're going to grab speed X. So if abs of speed X, and we're going to grab a less than 1. So if abs of speed X is less than 1, this is if we're moving at a decimal number, because we're actually going to make the speed X smoother. So if the speed X is less than 1, and the abs of speed X actually just makes it a negative number turn positive. For example, if I do -5, it turns it into 5. But if I do 5, it stays at 5. So that's why we did the abs of, because any negative number is always less than 1. So it's always going to set speed X to 0 if we're moving left. So therefore, we can never move left. So we're going to set speed X to 0, just to make sure that we stop. Now we're actually going to set the direction. So if not equals, if key X does not equal 0, then that means we are pushing a key. So we want to change the direction. So point in direction, key X multiplied by 90. And now, so now what we got to do is actually make sure that the player doesn't go flying off. So we need to check if the abs of speed X, which we have that up here, we could just duplicate that. The absolute value of speed X is greater than, and we're going to need a new variable for this. Let's call it max speed for all sprites. So this one, in this case, we're going to, wait, where's the variable? What the heck? Hang on. Oh yeah, this kind of, wait, did I even push okay? Wait a second. Oh yeah, it's there. Hey everybody. So this is just a quick bug fix. So I forgot to actually set the max speed under the define reset player. So right after gravity, we're going to set max speed to 5 and just put that right there. and then continue on with the tutorial. If you see this gone, don't delete it. You need this for everything to actually work. So we have our max speed variable. It just disappeared for some reason. So we're gonna make sure it's max speed. And this is gonna be the maximum speed that our player can go. So we're gonna check if it's actually going faster than the maximum speed. So we're gonna set speed x to, now this is the tricky part. You need to multiply max speed on the left, and now we need to divide the abs of speed x divided by speed x. So what this does, the absolute value of speed x divided by the normal value of speed x, this will make it so that if we're like at speed, let's say -5, if we're going left, then we need a absolute value. So 5 times -5. 5 divided by -5, which will equal -1. So this will turn our speed x value into either -1, 1, or 0. So now what we're going to do is multiply maximum speed by that. So it would be either -5 or 5. If we need an if else for this one. So when we're in the air, the slowing down won't account for this if we're in the air, because we need air resistance, which is way slower than the normal distance. So let's make use of our jump time variable. If jump time is less than, say, 4, because if it's not greater than 3 down here in the move vertical, then we have to add 1, so that's less than 4. Then we can set speed x to, and we still need a multiply. We need speed x times. So now, let's just duplicate this into the else. So we need a 0.8. So this is if we're touching the ground, then we can slow down as normal. But if we're in the air, we need a little bit of air resistance, so we can't do speed x times 1. We need to do speed x times 0.95, which is just a little lower than 1, which will make the player slow down less. Now, before we can test this, we actually have to make changes to the jump time. Let's bring the fixed collision down here. So now, I'm just going to move this over here. So now, we are going to change this if touching blocks for an if else. So, we're going to move that all there, then remove this if. And we're going to move this change jump time by 1 into this else. And now, what we need to do is make a greater than. And since we already have the move y variable in the controls right here, we're not even making use of it for jumping. So let's actually do that now. So grab the thing of controls and move y is down here. So if move y of controls is greater than 0, place that with the key up arrow. I think we can give that a test. It's actually, yeah. So let's test the first thing. Am I walking smoothly? Wait, what the heck? Okay, I have no idea what's going on. Hang on as I fix this bug. Oh, right. Alright, so what I forgot to do is actually set max speed. So what we're going to do here is set max speed to 5. That's what I forgot to do. So now let's test it. Okay, I walk smoothly. Now let's see the turning left bug. And it's fixed. So now when we turn left, we don't instantly face right again. So what we're going to do now is test. So it slows down normally, but if we're in the air, it slows down way slower. Now, what we're going to do is prep our project for the title screen. Alright, so now let's replace some green flags with a new broadcast. So let's start in the player sprite. Let's add a when I receive. Create new world, because this only happens when we're creating a new world. So now the next one is in the blocks sprite, when flag clicked. Instead, we need a when I receive create new world. And let's do that. So we just finished that part. And right now, if we remove this broadcast create new world, then nothing should happen. Oh, wait. So in the stage, we need to add a create new world, so then it doesn't happen on the flag. So watch what happens when I remove this. We still see Steve. All that should happen is the music. So let's stop that, and then we can see the whole project is stopped. So what we need to do first is hide Steve. So when green flag clicked, hide. And in the title screen, we're actually going to add a character editor, so then you could switch between Steve and Alex. So what I'm going to do is copy Steve's name here with a copy, and then go into code. We're going to set our player skin with a new variable called player. Click OK. So we're going to set player to, and then we're going to paste what we copied, which in this case it's Steve, all lowercase. Now hide the player spread, the player. So set size to 100 in the reset player, so then the size is normal again. And also we need to switch costume to the player right there. And lastly, we need to show because we hid it over here. Which now, if we test that, since with this hide, let's look at player. Let's show that. So right now, it's just 0 because that's what all variables start as. So if we push the green flag, then the player is hidden, and the player variable is set to Steve. So now let's make the actual title screen. So what we're going to do is broadcast a new message in the stage backdrop. We're going to call it title screen. This will tell every single sprite that we're going to use the title screen now. So let's click into the buttons sprite. Let's start with making the buttons. So when green flag clicked, switch backdrop, not costume, backdrop, to menu. This makes sure that we're at the menu. Oh, and also there's a little white border there. To fix that, we just gotta stretch this out that way and that way. And also this way and this way. Now the border is fixed. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep it like it is. So now, what I'm going to do is click back into the buttons sprite. So we're going to make sure to hide the player. And also we got to hide the buttons. We need the title screen to be broadcasted first. So when I receive title screen, then we could actually make the buttons. So add that now. We need this ID variable. And if you don't have it, just make it, type ID for this sprite only, and click OK. But I already have it, so it's going to tell me that it already exists. So what we got to do is make sure that every single button is not there. And we're obviously going to use clones for this, so let's broadcast and wait for a new message called delete all clones. Okay, so now when I receive delete all clones, every single clone will receive this. So let's delete this clone if we're deleting all the clones. So now we have to add a new custom block, so then we can add the two buttons really quickly by ticking this run without screen refresh. So let's name the block create, and then add an input, which is number of buttons, and then add a label of buttons. So create number of buttons, buttons, run without screen refresh, and then OK. So let's make use of this right now by adding the create buttons. We're going to create two buttons, the play button and the edit button. Let's just clean up the blocks and don't delete ID. So now let's finally make use of the ID variable. So set ID to 1 and repeat for number of buttons times. This is the number of buttons that we want to make. So create clone of myself and change ID by 1. Now after this repeat loop is done and after it creates two buttons, we're going to set ID to the empty value. This is to make sure that we can tell the difference between clones, which will have an ID set, and the main sprite, which will have an ID not set. Well, it'll just be the empty value. Let's just click on that now. Alright, so now what we're going to do is make the buttons actually work. So when I start as a clone, now the positioning of the clone is slightly different from what you would expect. So you would expect to actually position it over here, but I have a smarter idea. Let's use a little bit of maths. So when I start as a clone, go to x0. This will make it go into the middle on the y-axis. So we could set the y to whatever we want, but it'll just stay right in the center. So go to x, and we need to multiply. Since the ID is different for each button, set ID to ID multiplied by minus 50. So go to xy 0 and ID multiplied by minus 150. No. Go to x0, y ID multiplied by negative 50. And then show. Forever, if else. And we're going to check if we're touching the mouse pointer. So this will add hover effects. So switch costume 2, and we need a join block. Let's join with the ID on the right side, but we can't have Apple ID. Like, for example, if our ID is 2, we can't have Apple 2 because there's no costume named Apple 2. So let's look in the costumes. What do we see? Well, we see button 1 as the first costume. This is the start button, which will be at the top, so that its ID will be 1, so we're going to have button 1. So let's make use of that. Button 1. So now if our button ID is 1, then we're going to have button 1. And if our ID is 1, then it's going to join that. So let's test it. Right now, as you can see, it starts off with 2 starts. And if we hover over the start one, nothing happens. But if we hover over this one, it turns to the edit. So what's happening here? Well, since there's an else, we need to actually put a switch costume there. And this is if we're not touching the mouse pointer, so it'll be normal, and not the hover costume. Now the hover costume will make the outline and the actual letters white. So what we're going to do there is use the button hover. So let's copy that. Copy button hover from the costumes tab, and then in the code tab, in the if, not the else branch, just the if, and then Control V or Command V if you're on Mac. So now we can test this. Right away, you could tell that there's, whoa, did you see that? It's the hover. So right away, you could tell that there's the start and the edit. And it's not like start like before. There's actually a start. Now this is getting me to want to push the button, so let's add that now. When this sprite clicked. So first of all, if this is the original sprite, we don't want anything to happen, and we already have a way of telling if this is the original sprite. So set ID to nothing. That's what it says in the create buttons custom block. So let's actually check that now. If ID is equal to the empty value, then we're going to stop this script. And like I said, this already checks for the main sprite. And if the main sprite is clicked, we don't want anything to happen. So stop the script. So we are going to wait until not mouse down. Just make sure that we're not like pushing, like, so then if we start but the mouse is already down, then it's going to break a block since we're clicking. So we have to wait until the mouse is released. Now everything that we do has to be inside of this specific if touching mouse pointer, because if you're clicking it but you're like holding it and you're like, no, I don't really want to do this, I want to edit my character when on the play button, so they're going to move their mouse away, then release it. So now they're not touching the mouse pointer, so anything inside of this won't run. So first we're going to start sound click. If you don't have this sound, then look in the sound sprite and you'll find it right here. That's what it sounds like. So let's go back into the buttons and start that sound inside of the if. Now we're going to add another if inside of the if and check if ID is equal to 1. Then we're going to broadcast create new world. And now if ID equals 2, then broadcast a new message called edit. Guess what this does? It opens the editor menu. The character editor. So now, what's ID of 3 is actually the back button for when you're inside of the menu. So what we're going to do is check if ID equals 3, then we're going to broadcast title screen. This will take us back to play and edit. Now after this, since we already have the delete all clones, we could just put that right underneath, because either way we're still doing it, since we're like going to do all this stuff. So now we need to actually make the button appear for when you're in the edit mode. So when I receive edit, then we need to make sure that there's only the original sprite left. So broadcast delete all clones and wait. This wait makes sure that it just doesn't broadcast and then run the rest. It waits until every single sprite, or in this case every single clone, has deleted itself. Then we can go continue, but it'll be the only sprite. Since the sprite can't be deleted, the script will just keep running. So now what we're going to do is set ID to 3. This is the back button in the skin editor. So, and now what we're going to do is create clone of myself. Then set ID back to the empty value. So then we can check if this is still the main sprite, because we set ID to 3. So now let's run the project. So if we click start, then there's still the game. The game is perfectly fine. We can walk around, break blocks, but if we click edit, then there's the back button. And that's about the positioning. So if all 3 of these buttons were shown, it would be start, edit, and then back would be right here. So that's a clever way of positioning. So now let's actually work on the character editor in the title screen. So in the player sprite, we're going to actually do all of the code in here. So when I receive title screen, Then we're gonna stop other scripts in Sprite, then hide, and delete this clone. Why are we using clones? Well, so then we can have the buttons or the skins that we could click on to change the skin and what the skin looks like so that the player can see is going to be the original sprite, which is why we're hiding and stopping all the scripts and then deleting this clone. So what we're going to do is when I receive edit, this we're actually going to do all the cloning. So show, and we need a custom block for this, but we already have one that's exactly like making buttons, but instead it's making skins. So let's create. So in the button sprite, we have the create number of buttons. So we could actually just move that block into the player sprite. So now we have one in the buttons and one in the players. But we're not even creating buttons, we're creating skins. So let's edit this custom block. Change everywhere where you see buttons to skins. So now it's actually readable. And we're not making buttons, we're making skins, like I said. So after doing that, it automatically makes a new ID variable for this sprite only. So if we make it shown, it says player semicolon ID, which means that it's for this sprite only. So we can add that block, the custom block, create skins. We only have 2 skins, Steve and Alex. If you want to add more, then just add more of this button. Add more of 2. So now, forever, go to X, and let's go with minus 100, Y of 0. Set size to 250. This is to make it on the left and big, because this is only running on the original sprite, which is going to be shown, so then you could see it, like nice and big. And then for inside of the forever loop, this is all 3 blocks. Go to X, set size, and switch costume to player. This will make sure that it always switches to the player costume. Now let's actually work on the clones, which will make it so that it will be 2 smaller ones, or more, if you want to add new skins. So when I start as a clone, set size to 150. This is just half more than the original size, so then it's a little bit bigger and easier to click on. And then show, because it'll probably be hidden, just in case. So now the positioning, we're going to use the same like multiply ID by trick. So not divide, multiply. So no, not subtract, multiply. Okay, so go to X, ID multiplied by 50. And we're actually going to subtract 50 for this. The reason why is so that if the ID is 1, then it will be at straight in the middle. So we have lots of space for any new skins. And the Y is also right in the middle. And then lastly, since this isn't in a forever loop, just switch costume to ID. So now, if we run the project and then click edit, you can see that this is the current skin that we have, and these are going to be the buttons. But right now, it doesn't even show anything. So let's actually do that when we click it. So when this sprite clicked, if, and then we're going to do the same check in the button sprite for the main one. But since it's actually shown, if we click on it, then something will actually happen. So we need to check that. If ID is greater than the empty value, I made another mistake. So I did if ID is greater than the empty value, then whatever's in here will run for all the clones. But we need to stop the script. So don't put an ID is greater than, put an ID is equal to. the empty value. Then continue with the rest of the tutorial and stop this script. We're not hiding because we still need it to be shown. And lastly, this is the last script of the episode. The last block, set player to costume name. Not ID, costume name. Now, the episode is finally over and we can run the project. Let's run it. So here we have like 2D Minecraft. So now we know what we're playing. If we click edit, we can see that our skin is Steve, but we can click Alex. What the heck? Wait a second. Wait, if ID equals the empty value. So now, if we click on Alex, then it changes to Alex. If we click on Steve, it changes to Steve. Let's see if Alex works. Finally, we have Alex. And now, let's see if we click on Alex and then Steve, then we see Steve again. Good to see you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Shout out to HelloGuys23442 for the character editor idea. Hopefully you guys love this episode because I added a title screen with a character editor and improved the player movement and day and night. But there's one thing that we haven't improved yet. Terrain generation. Let's see if we can edit the terrain generation. So now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Oh, and also a quick thing to note, my voice has changed a lot ever since the first episode. If you don't believe me, just click on the first episode because it's just at the beginning of the playlist that this video is in.